More than 30 unofficial sequels were made using his character's name. Over 50 films in Germany alone slapped that name on their posters. The British government banned the original. For nearly 3 decades, the character spawned an entire industry, and the man who created him was a 23-year-old photographer's assistant who couldn't speak English, had zero connections in the film business, and was paid almost nothing, while everyone else got rich off his face. So how did Franco Nero, a broke kid from a farming village near Parma, end up dragging a coffin through freezing mud and accidentally rewriting the rules of the Western genre forever? This is how it happened. Stick to the end while I tell you 10 unbelievable stories from one of the wildest lives in cinema history. Number 1, the Carabinieri's son, who had nothing to lose. Francesco Clemente Giuseppe Sparanero was born on November 23, 1941, in the tiny village of San Prospero Parmense, near Parma, Italy. His father was a strict commissioned officer in the Carabinieri, Italy's national military police. His mother came from rural Apulia in the deep south. Both parents hailed from San Severo in the province of Foggia, hard scrabble southern stock, even though Franco was raised in the north. The family moved constantly because of his father's military postings. Young Francesco grew up first in Bedonia, then Milan, shaped by the deprivations of post-war Italy. Rationing, reconstruction, the slow grind toward recovery. He started acting in school plays at 6 years old. By his teenage years, he was organizing and directing student productions. He briefly studied economics at the University of Milan, or dropped out and enrolled at the prestigious Piccolo Teatro di Milano under director Giorgio Strehler. The theater school lasted exactly 2 months. Nero later explained, acting is 10% technique and 90% being smart. The school wanted to teach him a craft. He wanted to be something. Broke and restless, he moved to Rome at 22. He worked as a photographer's assistant. He appeared in Italian photo novels, the fumetti that served as stepping stones for aspiring actors around Cinecittà Studios. He had no connections, no money, no plan beyond showing up and refusing to leave. Then, a friend at Dino De Laurentiis Studios took close-up photographs of the young man's face. Those photographs ended up on the desk of John Huston, and everything changed. Number 2, John Huston, Shakespeare, and the trick that fooled Hollywood. Huston was casting his epic biblical film, The Bible, in the beginning, and needed a young actor with physical presence to play Abel opposite Richard Harris's Cain. When he saw Nero's photographs, he summoned him to a hotel room. Huston looked at this unknown Italian kid and said one word, undress. He needed to see the physique. 2 days later, Franco Nero had his first major film role, but Huston gave Nero something far more valuable than a part in the Bible. He gave him English. Specifically, he handed Nero recordings of Shakespeare, performed by John Gielgud, Michael Redgrave, and Laurence Olivier, the 3 greatest classical actors in the English-speaking world. Nero memorized the speeches phonetically. He could recite 30 minutes of Shakespeare without understanding a single word. He was performing a magic trick, creating the illusion of fluency through pure auditory imitation. Nobody could tell the difference between a man who understood Shakespeare and a man who had simply memorized the sounds. This trick would change his life twice. First with John Huston, and then, in a moment of inspired desperation, with a Hollywood director named Joshua Logan, who was about to hand him the role of Sir Lancelot in a $14 million Warner Brothers musical. But that story comes later. Because first, Franco Nero had to meet a director who was about to change the Western genre forever, a man named Sergio Corbucci, and a character called Django. Number 3, the film nobody believed in. The story of how Django came to exist in 1966 is almost as improbable as the film itself. Corbucci was approached by young producer Manolo Bolognini, who needed a cheap spaghetti western to recoup losses from a failed art film. There was no proper screenplay, only scattered ideas on paper. The budget was less than $100,000. 3 actors were in contention. American Mark Damon had a scheduling conflict. Spanish actor Peter Martel was one producer's favorite. Franco Nero was Corbucci's choice. The deadlock was broken in the most absurd way imaginable. Distributor Fulvio Frisa was shown photographs of all three men and simply pointed at Nero's face. No audition, no screen test, a finger pointed at a photograph, and Nero almost said no. He was a theater-trained actor from the Piccolo Teatro. Spaghetti westerns were considered beneath serious actors. Cheap, violent, cranked out on tiny budgets by Italian studios trying to cash in on Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy. It took director Elio Petri to change his mind. Petri delivered the blunt advice that launched a legend. Do people know you? Nobody knows you. So you have nothing to lose. Just do the movie. Franco Nero was 23 years old. He had nothing, and he had nothing to lose. He said yes. Number 4. Mud, Whiskey, and the Coffin That Changed Everything. Filming began in December 1965 and wrapped by late February 1966. The locations were the dilapidated Helios Film Studios outside Rome, Tor Caldara near Anzio, and the freezing hills outside Madrid. The conditions were absolutely brutal. Nero was too young for the role, so he grew stubble and applied fake wrinkles around his eyes. His voice was dubbed by veteran actor Nando Gazzolo because at 23, he still sounded like a kid. He personally asked Corbucci to dress Django in a black Union Army uniform, a deliberate nod to his surname, since Nero means black in Italian. Corbucci had originally envisioned snow, but the weather refused to cooperate. What they got instead was mud. Endless, relentless, gray-skied mud. And that accident became the film's defining visual signature, a grimy, underexposed, almost neo-realist atmosphere that made Django look like nothing else in the genre. The cast and crew kept Nero drunk on whiskey to cope with the freezing temperatures. He was reportedly hospitalized for hypothermia during production. And then there was the coffin. The iconic opening, Django dragging a coffin through the mud, was inspired by a comic magazine Corbucci found on a newsstand on Via Veneto. The physical toll was enormous. During one take, Corbucci told Nero to haul the coffin over a hill and past a river, promising to call Coute when the scene was done. Nero dragged the coffin. He collapsed by the river. He waited and waited. Nobody called. When he finally trudged back to the set, the entire cast and crew had packed up and gone home. Corbucci had abandoned him as a practical joke. The character's name was itself a dark joke, named after jazz guitarist Django Reinhardt, who famously played despite paralyzed fingers on his left hand. In the film's climax, Django's hands are crushed by the villain's men before he must fire a gun braced against a cemetery cross. The poetry was intentional. The violence was not. The big fight scene was shot in a single take because Nero, young and brimming with physical power, nearly knocked his stuntman unconscious. Nero recalled, "The other guy was dead at the end of it. Well, not really dead, but I was 23 and very strong." Number 5. Banned, Bootlegged, and Beloved. Django earned over 1 billion Italian lire at the box office, a staggering hit for a film that cost almost nothing. It went number 1 in Japan. It swept across Europe and Latin America like a fever. But in England, the reaction was very different. The British Board of Film Classification banned Django outright in 1967. The ear-cutting scene, the Gatling gun massacre, the hand-crushing. Censors had never encountered anything like it. The ban held for nearly 3 decades. Django wasn't granted a British certificate until 1993. At a private Warner Brothers screening during Nero's Camelot shoot, Paul Newman, Steve McQueen, and director Terrence Young all showed up to watch this obscure Italian Western everyone was talking about. Young watched it 3 times and was so inspired, he went on to create Red Sun in 1971. Jack Nicholson tried to buy the American distribution rights, but he was too late. The film spawned more than 30 unofficial sequels, exploiting Italy's loose copyright laws. In Germany alone, over 50 films were retitled as Django movies. Nero had no control over any of it. His face launched an industry, and he saw almost none of the money. Sergio Corbucci put it simply, Ford had John Wayne, Leone has Clint Eastwood, I have Franco Nero, and Nero He was already on his way to Hollywood because Joshua Logan had just offered him the role of a lifetime. Number 6. Lancelot, Shakespeare, and the Golden Globe. The leap from a $100,000 spaghetti western to a $14 million Warner Brothers musical is the kind of career jump that simply does not happen. But Franco Nero made it happen, with the same Shakespeare trick Huston had unknowingly given him years earlier. Joshua Logan cast Nero in Camelot, based on recommendations from Richard Harris and Huston himself. One massive problem: Nero's English still wasn't good enough. Logan was skeptical. In a moment of inspired desperation, Nero told Logan, "But, Mr. Logan, I know Shakespeare in English." Then he launched into As You Like It and kept going for 30 straight minutes. Monologue after monologue, perfect pronunciation, flawless rhythm, all memorized phonetically without understanding a word. Logan was stunned. If you can do Shakespeare in English, you can do a few bloody lines. Nero got the part. His singing was dubbed by professional Gene Merlino, but his screen presence was undeniable. Those piercing blue eyes, that physical intensity, the brooding charisma that had made Django a sensation. He earned a Golden Globe nomination for Best Actor in a Musical. A year earlier, he'd been dragging a coffin through mud. Now, he was playing King Arthur's greatest knight, opposite Richard Harris and Vanessa Redgrave. And Vanessa Redgrave, that meeting would change his life in ways far more profound than any film role. Number 7. Corbucci, Palance, Olivier, and the question that defined a career. Between 1966 and 1970, Franco Nero operated at a pace that defied logic. He appeared in 8 films in 1966 alone. Then came The Mercenary in 1968, Corbucci's politically charged spaghetti western, with a legendary Ennio Morricone score. Nero starred alongside Jack Palance and Tony Musante. Everyone warned Corbucci that Palance was impossible to work with, famously difficult, intimidating, unpredictable. Corbucci bet Nero a dinner that he could make Palance do anything. Then he proceeded to make the notoriously tough actor strip completely naked and play a homosexual villain, and Palance complied cheerfully. Nero marveled that Corbucci had so much humor and charm, he could make anyone do anything. He followed with Compañeros in 1970, again with Corbucci and Morricone, which grossed over 1.45 billion lire in Italy. He worked with the legendary Luis Buñuel on Tristana, opposite Catherine Deneuve. He won the David Di Donatello Award for Best Actor, Italy's equivalent of the Oscar. Then came the moment that defined everything. At Pinewood Studios, the elderly Laurence Olivier, perhaps the greatest actor of the 20th century, asked Nero for help reaching another soundstage. Nero didn't call for a wheelchair. He didn't flag down a golf cart. He picked up Olivier and carried him on his shoulder. And as Nero carried the most decorated actor in British history across the lot, Olivier asked him a question. Would you like to be a star or an actor? Nero said actor. Olivier's response was immediate. Then change roles all the time. Risk a lot. Stars play themselves. Actors disappear into their characters. Franco Nero took that advice and never looked back. Number 8. Keoma, Fassbinder's Napkin, and the ninja who couldn't fight. When the spaghetti western genre collapsed in the late 1970s, Nero made Keoma in 1976 with director Enzo Castellari, widely considered the last great spaghetti western. The original screenplay was thrown out 3 days into filming. Most scenes were improvised. Nero chose the film's final line himself, a man whose free never dies, stealing it from a Claire Huffaker novel. Co-star Woody Strode used his own personal bow throughout filming and gifted it to Nero afterward. Years later, that bow was stolen from Nero's country house. He wept. Then came one of cinema's great lost what-ifs. German director Rainer Werner Fassbinder was such a devoted fan that he owned 40 videotapes of Nero's films. At a Berlin restaurant, Fassbinder grabbed a napkin, wrote a contract committing Nero to his next 3 films, and Nero signed. They made Querelle in 1982. Fassbinder's final masterpiece, with Nero playing the gay lieutenant opposite Brad Davis and Jean Moreau. Then Fassbinder died. He was 37 years old. Those other 2 films were never made. The Napkin contract became a relic of a collaboration cinema never got to see. The 1980s brought one of Nero's strangest detours. He starred in Enter the Ninja for Cannon Films, an Italian playing a Texan ninja with zero martial arts training. His fights were done by a double. His voice was dubbed. The film was critically savaged, but it accidentally launched the entire 1980s ninja movie craze. Without Franco Nero pretending to be a martial artist, there would have been no Revenge of the Ninja, no American Ninja, no decade of ninja films flooding video stores. He also turned down the lead in La Piovra, which became Italy's most successful TV series ever, and The Garden of the Finzi-Continis, which won the Academy Award. But he kept working, 4 to 5 films a year. If you're a Hollywood star, he said, you make 1 movie a year. I can make 5 in Europe. Number 9, Vanessa, Heartbreak, and a love story that took 39 years. The romance between Franco Nero and Vanessa Redgrave is one of cinema's great real-life love stories, and it is far more complicated than any film either of them ever made. They met on the Camelot set in 1967. She played Guinevere, he played Lancelot. Life imitated art with almost eerie precision. Nero's first impression was spectacularly unromantic. He saw a woman wearing blue jeans with holes, glasses, and no makeup, and told director Joshua Logan he wasn't sure they'd found the right actress. Then, Redgrave wrote him a note, in Italian, inviting him to dinner. When he arrived at her home, a beautiful woman opened the door. Nero told her he was there to see Miss Vanessa Redgrave, and this beautiful woman said, "I am she." He was instantly smitten. Their son, Carlo Gabriel Nero, was born on September 16, 1969. They separated around 1971, torn apart by Redgrave's consuming far-left political activism and by fundamental cultural differences between a passionate Italian and a firebrand English radical. During the years apart, Nero dated Catherine Deneuve, Goldie Hawn, and Ursula Andress. Redgrave entered a long relationship with Timothy Dalton, but the connection never fully broke. Their son, Carlo, shuttled between Italy and London. In 1994, when Vanessa's daughter, Natasha Richardson, married Liam Neeson, it was Franco Nero who walked her down the aisle, because Natasha's father, Tony Richardson, had died of AIDS in 1991. By the mid-1990s, they had reconnected romantically. They married on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2006. Nearly 40 years after their first meeting, Nero told the LA Times simply, "Life is sometimes very complicated. I always loved her." Then tragedy struck with devastating force. On March 16th, 2009, Natasha Richardson, the woman Nero had walked down the aisle 15 years earlier, fell on a beginner's ski slope in Canada. She laughed it off initially. Hours later, she was in agony. She died on March 18th, 2009, at age 45 from a traumatic brain injury. Within 14 months, Redgrave also lost her brother Corin and her sister Lynn. In 2015, Redgrave herself suffered a near-fatal heart attack and was later diagnosed with emphysema. Through all of it, Nero stayed. The man who had walked away in 1971 never walked away again. In 2010, they co-starred in Letters to Juliet, playing reunited lost lovers in Verona, essentially performing a version of their own story on screen. In 2025, they appeared together again in The Estate, directed by their son, Carlo. 3 generations of the family working together. Number 10, Tarantino, John Wick, and the star on Hollywood Boulevard. The moment that reintroduced Franco Nero to an entirely new generation began with a chance encounter in Spain. While shooting Talk of Angels in 1998, co-star Penelope Cruz met a young director named Quentin Tarantino at the San Sebastian Film Festival. When she mentioned she was working with Nero, Tarantino went crazy. Over the following years, Tarantino publicly declared Nero one of his idols. At the Rome premiere of Kill Bill, Harvey Weinstein relayed from stage that Tarantino, sick in London, had asked a specific favor. "If Mr. Nero is in the audience, please give him my regards." Nero was there. When they finally met for lunch in Rome, Tarantino demonstrated encyclopedic knowledge of Nero's career, reciting dialogue from his old films and singing their theme music from memory. He had discovered Nero's work at 14, working in a video store in Los Angeles. In October 2011, the call came. Franco, I am going to do an homage to your movie, Django. I want you to be in it. Nero pitched his own subplot. Jamie Foxx's Django would see visions of a mysterious horseman in black, revealed as Nero, in a white father telling his black son to fight for freedom. Tarantino loved it, then went silent for 2 months. At a 3-hour breakfast at the Beverly Hills Hotel, he gently declined. Your idea is great, but for the film, it doesn't work. What remained was the perfect cameo. At a bar, Nero's character asks Jamie Foxx, "What's your name?" Foxx answers, "Django. Can you spell it?" D-J-A-N-G-O. The D is silent, and Franco Nero, the original Django, delivers the line that brought audiences to their feet. I know. Django Unchained grossed $449 million worldwide, and suddenly, a whole new generation knew the name Franco Nero. He kept working with remarkable stamina into his 80s. He voiced Uncle Tolino in Cars 2. He played Julius, the suave Continental hotel manager, in John Wick, Chapter 2. He played the Pope twice in separate films. He appeared in the Django TV series as the Reverend, and on February 12th, 2026, at the age of 84, Franco Nero received the 2,835th star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at 1611 Vine Street. His speech reached back 6 decades. 60 years ago, when I came here for the first time to work on Camelot, I remember walking here, wondering if one day my name will also appear. Well, that day has arrived. And finally, Franco Nero can be trampled on by a lot of people without getting hurt. So let's remember what we just witnessed. A Carabinieri's son born in a farming village near Parma. A photographer's assistant who arrived in Rome with nothing. A theater dropout who memorized Shakespeare without understanding a word. A 23-year-old who almost turned down Django because he thought it was beneath him. A man who dragged a coffin through freezing mud while the crew kept him drunk on whiskey. A man who jumped from a $100,000 Italian Western to a $14 million Hollywood musical in a single year. A man who carried Laurence Olivier on his shoulders and chose to be an actor over a star. A man whose love story with Vanessa Redgrave took 39 years to reach the altar. A man who made more than 250 films across 30 countries over 6 decades. And at 84, insists his best role is still to come. His director said it best. Ford had John Wayne. Leone had Clint Eastwood. Corbucci had Franco Nero. And the D is silent. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and join us for the next legend. Because on this channel, we don't forget the men who built the movies we love.